Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's class of Basic Hebrew on this fourth day of December 2022. We have been previously talking a little bit about Hebrew nouns, but now I'm going to go back and talk a little bit about Hebrew verbs. Now, you will remember that when we were talking about Hebrew verbs and first introducing them, we had indicated that Hebrew verbs have 5 different components: the stem, aspect, person, gender, and number. And when we're talking about stem, this is referring to the type of action. So when we are talking a little bit about Hebrew verbs here, in English, we have what we call tense, where we're especially focused on the time and the type of action. Hebrew is not so much concerned with time as it is concerned with the type of the action. And so we call those stems. And these stems are divided into 7 different types. So we have the kal and the nifal, the piel and the pual, the hifil and the hofel, and then the hithpael. And so in this particular instance, then, the kal is the basic action. So this is just talking about the action in its most basic sense. For instance, as in the sentence, I break. I broke the plate. We'll make it past tense for right now. So I broke the plate. So it's that simple action of breaking. Now, the kal also has a passive counterpart, which we call the nifal. And this would be the passive of the kal. So in this instance, instead of the subject doing the action, this would be where the subject is receiving the action. Thus, up above with the kal, where we had the example of I broke the plate, which would be that basic action of breaking, and I am the one who is doing the action. In this instance with the nifal, still we would have that basic action, that same idea of broke, but in this instance, the recipient of the action, the plate, is going to be the subject of the verb. So thus this would be the plate was broken by me. So kal, basic action, I broke the plate. Nifal is the passive of the kal, the plate was broken by me. Then we also have the piel, which is going to be the intensive action. So in other words, I take that action of breaking and I intensify it in some ways. Now, there are different ways in which I can intensify an action. I can intensify an action by repeating it. So thus, if I just clap my hands, that would be simple clapping. But I can intensify that action of clapping by doing it repeatedly. And so thus the second action, that repeated action, that is going to be the more intense. I can also intensify an action by causing it to occur. And so thus as well, say I break the plate. So, but if that's an accidental breaking, then it's not going to be as intense an action as if I deliberately threw the plate down and broke it. And so that causation, that deliberateness would intensify the action. I can also intensify an action in terms of degree. Thus, back to the clapping again. I can clap very gently, but then I can intensify that by doing it more loudly. And so thus that second would be more intense. So there are different ways in which an action can be intensified, and that idea is captured in the piel. So again, taking this basic idea of to break something, I can intensify that action by saying, instead of just break, I shattered something. So shattering would still be a breaking in that respect, but it would definitely be a more intense breakage because you would have far more pieces that would be involved. So thus, I shattered the plate. And that would be the idea behind the PL then. Now, just as the cal had a passive counterpart, so too the PL also has a passive counterpart as well. And so thus we would call this passive counterpart the pual. And again, in this particular instance, the subject is going to be the recipient of the action. So thus the plate was shattered by me. And that would be that passive of the PL idea. Then, two, we also have the Hiffiel, which is going to be causative action. So causation. So I caused the plate to break, I could say. And thus I'm getting that, I have that same idea of breakage there, but now we've also gotten the idea of causation to enter into it as well. Now, as well here, the Hiffiel has a passive idea, which we call the Hofal as well. And so in this instance, just as in the others, this would be where the subject is receiving the action. So thus the plate was caused to break by me, we might say. And then we have the Hithpael. This is going to be reflexive action, where the subject is both doing and receiving the action. So the plate broke itself. Where you can see in this instance, we still have that same idea of breakage, but the plate is doing the action to itself. And so that would be the idea of the Hithpael. So these are the different stems then. So you have the cal, basic action, I broke the plate. Nifal, the passive of the cal, the plate was broken by me. Piel, intensive action, I shattered the plate. Pual, the passive of the piel, the plate was shattered by me. Hiffiel, causative action, I caused the plate to break. Hofal, the passive of the Hiffiel, the plate was caused to break by me. Hithpael, reflexive action, the plate broke itself. So those are the different stems. Now we also have aspect as well. And this is going to refer to the completeness of the action, that is, whether the action is complete or not. So there are two different aspects in Hebrew. One is the perfect aspect. Perfect would be completed action, corresponds roughly to our past time, but again, that's very rough. And then we also have the imperfect, which would be incomplete action. And one of the things that distinguishes this perfect from the imperfect is that the imperfect is going to have what we call an imperfect preformative. And there are four different imperfect preformatives. We have the aleph, the yod, the tau, and the nun, where the aleph is going to indicate first common singular. The nun will indicate first common plural. The yod, third masculine singular or plural. And the tau would be everything else, which would be the second masculine singular and plural, the second feminine singular and plural, and the third feminine singular and plural. And so those are going to be the imperfect performatives. If you see those, you know that you're dealing with an imperfect verb. Then we also have person, which is going to refer to the person of the subject. So first person, where the speaker is the subject, I. Second person, the receiver of the message, is the subject, you. Third person, the entity talked about, is the subject, he, she, or it. Then as well, we have the gender. So this would be basically masculine or feminine. Masculine just lets us know that the word that serves as the subject to the verb is masculine, and feminine lets us know that the word serving as the subject is feminine. And then we have number, singular or plural. So singular, the word serving as the subject is singular. Plural, plural for verbs has a tendency to absorb both the plural and the dual for the subject there. So plural would indicate that the word serving as the subject is either plural or dual. And so those then are the components of Hebrew verbs. And we had also taken a look at the forms of these different paradigms, especially taking a look at the Cal perfect and the Cal imperfect. So here, Cal perfect and Cal imperfect. And remember, as we go through this, the three X's here stand for the three consonants of the Hebrew root, because of the fact that most Hebrew words are built off of three consonants. And so those X's are there just to illustrate where the vowels for the Cal perfect and imperfect would fall. So thus, third masculine singular under the Cal perfect, we would have a. So that commates underneath the first root, the pathak underneath the second. Third feminine singular, a. Notice that you do have that method there that is holding the syllable underneath the first consonant open. And thus the schwa that follows is going to be vocal in that instance because it's starting the next syllable. So a. Second masculine singular, a-ta, accent on the second syllable. Second feminine singular, a-at. First common singular, a-ati. Again, you do have that accent on the second syllable. Third common plural, which just means that this is the same form for both masculine and feminine. So a-u, again, notice that method there. Then we have the second masculine plural, i'atem. Second feminine plural, i'aten. And first common plural, anu, accent on the second syllable again. So those are the forms then of Cal perfect. So Cal perfect, you have a-a, a-a, a-ata, a-at, a-ati, a-u, i'atem, i'aten, and anu. Then we also have here the Cal imperfect. And remember again, Cal imperfect, so we're going to be seeing those imperfect performatives. And as we said, those imperfect performatives were the aleph, the yod, the tau, and the nun, where the aleph would indicate first common singular, the nun would indicate first common plural, the yod would indicate third masculine singular or plural, and the tau would indicate everything else. That is second masculine singular and plural, second feminine singular and plural, and third feminine singular and plural. So those are what those imperfect performatives are going to indicate. And so these forms here, you can see Cal imperfect, third masculine singular, y-o, third feminine singular, t-o, second masculine singular, t-o. Yes, the exact same form as the third feminine singular. But again, remember, each of these verbs that we're looking at takes place in a context. And when you're dealing with a context, it is easy to tell the difference between a subject, she, third feminine singular, or a subject, you, second masculine singular. Easy to tell in a context. So yes, same form, but it is not ambiguous. Second feminine singular, ti, first common singular, a-o, third masculine plural, y-u, third feminine plural, teona, second masculine plural, ti-u, and second feminine plural, teona, and first common plural, ne-o. So you can see those forms again for the Cal imperfect. Ye-o, ti-o, ti-o, ti-i, a-o, ye-u, teona, ti-u, teona, ne-o. And again, you'll notice that the third feminine plural and the second feminine plural are the same form, teona. Again, you put it into a context, it's not ambiguous. So those are the basic forms. Now, I do want to go ahead and come on over here. This is taken from another Hebrew grammar book that we use. This is going to be the basics of Biblical Hebrew by Pradikov and Pelt, and he has this paradigm in the back of that particular book. And so that's where this is taken from. But notice here, especially looking at the cal at this point, the cal perfect, and notice that he is going to be using here the root kof, teth, lamed. So katal, which is basically the idea of to kill. So thus you have then the different forms here. So cal perfect third masculine singular, katal. Do you hear that pointing that we were talking about a little bit earlier as we were going through that paradigm? So third masculine singular. So this would then be he killed. Then you come on down to the third feminine singular, ka-tala. So you can hear that in there, ka-tala. And so this would be she killed. Second masculine singular, katalta. So a'ata, you can hear that in there. And so this is that second masculine singular, you killed. Katalt, you, feminine singular, killed. Katalti, I killed. Katalu, they killed. Kataltem, you, masculine plural, killed. Katalten, you, feminine plural, killed. And then katalnu, which would be we killed. So that would be those forms there. So you have again, katal, katala, katalta, katalt, katalti, katalu, kataltem, katalten, and katalnu. And so those are the forms that we're looking at there for the cal perfect. But then we also have the imperfect. So incomplete action corresponds roughly to our future and present tense. So, and there's a little bit more to it, but that's a good starting point for right now. So notice here as we go through this, third masculine singular. Now remember when we were going through that paradigm, that third masculine singular was yit-o, and you can hear that as we're going through this. Yiktol. So third masculine singular, yit-o, yiktol. So you can hear where that's coming from. So yiktol, this would be he will kill. Tiktol, she will kill. Tiktol, you, masculine singular, will kill. Tiktali, you, feminine singular, will kill. Ektol, I will kill. Yiktalu, they will kill. Tiktolna, they, feminine plural, will kill. Tiktalu, you, masculine plural, will kill. Tiktolna, you, feminine plural, will kill. And niktol, we will kill. So those then are the forms. And so you can hear where all of those vowel pointing that we were talking about came into play with this. And these are going to be the normal pointing that you will see. Now, there are some verbs that will do things a little bit differently because of the way that, because of the different consonants that they have. And we call these weak verbs, and I'm going to go ahead and introduce this concept here. But, so we do have basically this idea is where you have certain consonants that are weak. So, and these are consonants that are going to require special phonological accommodations, special vowel accommodations, because of the way that these particular consonants are produced. And that is the way that they are pronounced. These weak consonants include the gutturals. So remember, those gutturals are aleph, hey, kaith, and ayin. So those gutturals, because of the way that they are formed, they're going to require certain accommodations. For instance, the kaith and the ayin are going to prefer before and underneath them a pathak. And so that's going to be one of those things. And so in order to accommodate that, sometimes you will see a vowel that will change to the pathak underneath the influence of that kaith and ayin. The aleph and the hey, because they are weak consonants to the point where honestly to our ears we can't even hear them. Because of that, These are, in fact, going to, in some instances, require that a vowel lengthen because it's almost as though the syllable is open rather than closed. And then some other things as well. The gutturals can't take the dagesh forte, and that comes into play, especially when you're dealing with the PL or pual stem. The noon requires special things because remember, when a noon is vowelless, it has a tendency to assimilate, that is, it will disappear. And then you have the yod and the wow, which these two consonants are pronounced in such a way that they are very, very close to being vowel-like. And so in that respect, then, you will see sometimes that these two will lose their consonantal character and become more vocalic. And so verbs which have one or more of these weak consonants in their root are said to be weak. You will hear me refer to them as weak verbs. And as a result, then, they will change their vowel pointing according to the requirements of the weak consonant. As an example here, let's take a look at the verb amer. And so thus I do have this particular document over here with amer. So the word amer, this is the idea of to say. And you will notice as we take a look at the triliteral root here, we have the aleph, the mem, and the resh. So aleph, mem, resh. And on the front there, you notice the aleph. Now let's see, what were those weak consonants again? They were the gutturals, that is the aleph, hey, cheth, and ayin. We had the noon as well. And then we also had the wow and the yod. So the aleph here is one of our gutturals. It is therefore weak. And as a result, you will see certain changes that will occur with respect to the normal pointing where this aleph is. So for instance, as we go through this, so amar, that's that regular pointing, which there's no problem with that because the aleph can go ahead and take that kametz. So then you have amara, amarta, amart, amarti, amaru, but then you come to the second masculine plural underneath the cal perfect, and here we do have a little bit of a change. So here we have then amartem, and notice that underneath the aleph here, we have the hatev pathak. That is, we have a composite schwa. Now you will notice, if I come back over here, notice here the second masculine plural, we had a vocal schwa underneath the first root letter. But here we have a composite schwa. And the reason for that is because the aleph is a guttural, and gutturals cannot take the simple vocal schwa. Instead, they take the composite schwa, and that is what we're seeing here. So that composite schwa replaces that simple vocal schwa underneath the influence of the aleph. Then for the second feminine plural, once again, you have amarten, which again, notice, coming on back here. So second feminine plural, we had that simple vocal schwa underneath the first root letter. Well, here, the first root letter is again that guttural, which cannot take that simple vocal schwa, but it can take a composite schwa. And so that's what happens there. The composite schwa replaces the simple vocal schwa, yielding instead of emartem, we have amarten. And then for the first common plural, amarnu. Again, no issues there. But then you come on over here to the cal imperfect, and this is where things are going to be a little bit different. Remember when we were dealing with the pointing there in the cal imperfect, we had ye-o, te-o, te-o, te-e, a-o, and so forth. Well, here, instead of having yemer, we have yomer here. And the reason for that change, where we would have expected having a hierik underneath the yod, we actually have the holum there. Again, that is due to the phonological constraints of the aleph there. So the aleph, that it basically ends up making that initial syllable open because it is a very weak sound. And as a result, then that hierik could not stand. And so thus we have to have a long vowel there. And so thus we have that Holem in this instance. So you have Yomer, Tomer, Tomer, Tomerti, Omer. Notice that in this instance, so first common singular, we would have anticipated having the aleph as the imperfect performative. But because of the fact that our root began with the aleph, those two alephs coalesced. That is, they became one. And so thus we have just Omer here in this instance instead of a doubling of the aleph. Then you have Yomeru, Tomerna, Tomeru, Tomerna, and Nomer. And so those are the forms there. Another form that you will see rather frequently as well is Haya. And so Haya here, notice, let's see, what were those weak consonants again? So those weak consonants were the gutturals, aleph, hey, faith, ayin, the noon, and then also the yod and the wow. Now look at this particular verb here, haya. So haya, the three letters are hey, yod, hey. All three of those letters are weak. So you can imagine there are some interesting changes that occur here when we're dealing with the verb haya, to exist. So you have then haya, third masculine singular. And then once you start adding those endings to this, then that final hey is going to change to a tau. And so thus you have then hayitha, and then further on down here, you can see where the hey has actually changed to a yod. So thus you have hayitha. Notice that in this instance, you do have the Hickory yod there. So that yod has lost its consonantal character in that respect. So hayitha, hayith, hayithi, hayu, that is actually a consonantal yod there. The shurik is attached to that yod. So this is hayu. And then you have hayithem, hayithen, and hayinu. And so those are going to be the forms of haya in the perfect. Then you come on over here to the imperfect. So the cal imperfect, and you have yihya. You will also see this sometimes spelled as yihi as well. And that form actually occurs rather frequently. We see that rather frequently, especially in Genesis chapter 1. So you have yihya or yihi, tihya, tihya, tihi, ehya, yihu, and then this one is kind of interesting. So notice tihyena, and then you have tihu, tihyena, and nihya. And so those are going to be some forms there. Now I wanted to especially show you those two forms, Amar and Haya, because those are going to show up here in the passage that we're going to look at today. And so we're going to be...
Did I hear you say Yihya?
You did indeed.
Oh, okay.
You did indeed hear me say Yihya.
Sorry. Shall we say that one just rings a bell? I like both. I like both Ehya and Yihya because they're one and the same person. Ooh. Oh well. I'm going to turn my mic off. I'll behave.
Oh no, you're fine. But yes, so Yihya and Ehya, the name of our Lord, where he said to Moses, Ehya, Asher, Ehya, I exist. The one exists who exists. So, and then, so that would be here, you can see the cal imperfect, first common singular, ehya, and so thus he was saying, I am existing, imperfect, incomplete action. And then Moses, when he went to the Israelites, he did not say ehya, sent me, because he did not want to make it sound as though he was sending himself. So what did he do? He changed it to yihya. He is existing, sent me. And so you can see where those forms come from. But kind of an interesting thing, that is the name that he chose, that our Lord chose for himself there. But we're going to start taking a look at Genesis chapter 22. this afternoon as well. And we'll just go through the first couple of verses here. At this point, probably just verse 1 to illustrate that Haya and Amer there. But notice here, so this is the passage. And it came to pass after these things that God did tempt Abraham and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here I am. And so that is going to be that first verse here. And then we have next verse 1 in the Hebrew. So here it is then. Wayihi acher hadivarim ha'ele. Elohim nesa eth Avraham. Wayomer Elau Avraham. Wayomer Nemi. And so notice here, so Wayihi, right on the front of this, you can see that we do in fact have a wow consecutive on an imperfect. So wow with a pathak followed by a dagesh forte. Now the dagesh forte would go inside of the following letter, which would be the imperfect performative. In this particular instance, that dagesh forte is not there. The reason being this is such a familiar form that, they didn't need to put it there. They recognize Wayihi. You only see this particular form about 100 times before you get out of Genesis. So Wayihi then. So here then, this yod is going to be our imperfect performative. And remember what I said. The the yod would indicate third masculine, singular, or plural. Now, in order to determine if this is singular or plural, I would look to the end to see if there is a U class of vowel, because notice as we were working through this. So third masculine singular, this is ye-o. Third masculine plural is ye-u. So the third masculine plural has a U class of vowel, that shurik at the end. And so thus that is one of the easy ways to determine if I'm dealing with a third masculine plural or not. I look for a U class vowel. I don't have a U class vowel here, so I know this is going to be singular. And I also know this is going to be cal, because this is that form of haya that we looked at instead of seeing yihya. Here we have the shortened form, which is yihi, and that's exactly what we're dealing with here with the wow consecutive. So this then would be a cal imperfect third masculine singular, and it has the wow consecutive on it. And the wow consecutive has this tendency to flip the aspect. So it makes perfect verbs imperfect and imperfect verbs perfect. So even though this particular verb is imperfect in complete action, I'm going to translate it as though it is completed action. So then we would have then third masculine singular would be he, and then haya is the idea of to exist, and then I make it completed action. So then he existed. Acher. So acher, this is going to be the preposition after. So we have after, and then notice here we have hadivarim. And so here, hey with a pathak followed by a dagesh forte. So there's my article on the noun divarim, and I notice that I have that im ending there, which is going to be masculine plural, on the word davar. Notice that once again, we do have that kamates reduction under the influence of the fact that the accent moved when I added that ending. So davar is the idea of an expression. So thus we would have the expressions. Which expressions? Ha'ela. Notice that there's the article again. Hey with the pathak followed by a dagesh forte. But the dagesh forte would have gone inside of the aleph, which is a guttural, and it therefore rejected the dagesh forte, resulting in a lengthening of the vowel. And thus we have ha'ela, and ela is a demonstrative adjective. These, we would say. So these. So basically what this is saying is that what follows is going to exist after the matters that were described up above. So in actuality, this particular prep phrase here is actually the subject of the verb wayihi there. Then we have Wuha Elohim, Nisa, Eth, Avraham. And so again, you see the conjunction there. You can see the article on Elohim and the God. Kind of an interesting thing that they use the article there, pointing out that this is in fact the God, the only one who exists. And then we have Nisa. This is going to be a verb, but notice that we do have a Duggish forte in the middle root letter. And if I were to come on back to this here, notice as we go across, so you have the cal, nefal, piel. Notice here, when we're working with the piel, one of the things that happens is in the middle root letter, there is a Duggish forte. And that is diagnostic, that is characteristic of the piel. So that tells me then that I'm actually dealing with the piel, that idea of intensive action. It's third masculine singular in this instance. And this is basically the idea of to try to evaluate something. And so thus, and the God tried Eth Avraham. And notice here you have the definite object marker indicating that we are dealing with the object of the verb here. And this object being a proper noun is in fact definite. And this is in fact the proper name, Abraham. And then we have Wayomer, Elal, Avraham, Wayomer, Hineni. So notice, remember what I was saying about the form of Amar when it goes to the imperfect, it becomes Yomer. That's what we have here with another while consecutive. So while consecutive on an imperfect, we have the yod, which is going to be that third masculine. No U class vowel, so I know that this is going to be third masculine plural. So then he said, Elal. Here you can see that we have the preposition el, and then we have the al, which is going to be the third masculine singular pronominal suffix that we were going over last week. So to him. So then he said, so God said to him, to Abraham, Avraham. And that's what he said then. Abraham. And then we also have Wayomer, same word that we had up above, while consecutive on the imperfect, third masculine singular. So then he said, Hineni. And this is basically the verb hanan, that idea of to look upon something, and then you have the e, which is the first common singular pronominal suffix. So it's like saying, look upon me, or as the KJV said, here I am. Because if you're saying look upon me, you're saying I'm right here in essence. And so that then is what we're looking at. We'll get into some more of these verb forms in this particular passage a little bit later as well, starting next week. Is there anything else that you would like to bring up at this point, sir?
No, I don't think so. I think it's good. It's good.
All right.
Good place.
All right. Very good. So I'll go ahead and I'll stop the recording here then, and I will turn it over to you, sir.
Very good. And we will start again in just